Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, like button, subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you do tune in. Today, I'm joined by the coach of the Washington Commanders, Ron Rivera, as he made the rounds on Wednesday at the Super Bowl, having been named the USAA's Salute to Service Award winner. So through that, he did a little bit of a rounds. I was able to talk to him via Zoom. So I wanted to bring that to you for the podcast. You may have read or heard some of what he already talked about, but I wanted to give you a chance to listen to my full interview with him. We discuss the quarterback situation, why they feel comfortable with Sam Howell, not just that they are, but why. Did they learn some lessons from last year? I get into that. Talk about Daron Payne, the offensive coordinator, what Dan Snyder has told them. All that goes up, and why he didn't end up going to the Senior Bowl and the impact of that. Now, one thing we did not get into we didn't get into Chase Young, but I do know, because I was told, and I know others had talked to him about this, that they have not decided as to what to do with Chase Young and that fifth-year option. A couple things to know in this situation. One, the deadline for picking up that option is early May. Usually it's around May 3rd in that area. So that's the deadline for it. We're now, as I'm recording this, it's February 9th. They have a few months to decide. Rivera had told Michael Phillips, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, he said he kind of using this maybe as a motivational thing. Maybe it kind of spurs him the way Daron Payne was spurred playing for a contract last year. I don't know if it'll get to that point. It could, and I know a part of this deals with Young's health. He's coming off 2 years that were impacted greatly by the torn ACL and the ruptured patellar tendon. That, of course, impacted his season. He missed a combined, 22 games? That's a lot of time off for years 2 and 3 to see, to automatically go and say, yeah, we know what we're going to do if you're Washington. So now the question then becomes, what next? So again, they're undecided. It's not like they said they're not going to do it. They're just undecided. It could be as simple as seeing how does Young respond to this situation. And does he get more, is he somehow more motivated? Well, I can tell you, he's already been working out for a few weeks. So I think the motivation is there. So I don't think that's necessarily, I don't know that that's going to be the issue, but he is, like I said, I was told he was already working out. It could also be that Washington wants to see how Young responds to all this, and when they come back for the workouts in the spring. So they'll have a few weeks working out with Young, with him in the facility, before they need to make that decision. So I think there remains to be seen what happens. Some of the issue here is, would you really risk, and I talked about this with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, on his ESPN 630 radio show in DC, you could have a situation where you have both Montez Sweat and Chase Young playing for contracts next year. Is that a good situation? What happens if they both go out and have really good years? Well, you can always slap the franchise tag on one of them. If you gave Young the fifth-year option right now, it would cost them $17.452 million against the salary cap. If you wait a year and you want to, let's say, you want to, okay, he has a really good year, want to keep him around, well, you can put the franchise tag on him. The franchise tag for a defensive end, I believe this year is a little over 19 million. So next year, let's say it'll be a little over 20 million, maybe 21. So you're talking about it's really, if you wanted to keep him on a 1-year situation, you're talking about a few $1,000,000 if you don't use that tag. So it's not impossible to do what you want to do. The problem with that scenario is, if you had Young on the fifth-year option, you could then tag Montez Sweat. So there is an impact if you don't do this. It could also be that you can only keep one of them if you sign Daron Payne, which they want to do. So what does it leave us? Again, it's still undecided. I think there's more room or more information to come out of this for them to learn, for us to learn, and there's certainly more for me to learn, which I will pass along to you as much as I can. That's all I have for that situation right now. As far as the offense coordinator situation, we'll get into that a little bit. They are going to be talking. They want to talk to Eric Bieniemy after the Super Bowl. We do know that the two teams most interested, I think, that for Bieniemy would be Washington and Baltimore. they're a good situation for him in both cases because of this. You have a guy who has been with an offensive-minded head coach for a while, and that offensive-minded head coach is deeply involved in the game planning as well as calling plays. In Washington and even in Baltimore, you'd have a coach who is not an offensive-minded head coach. Harbaugh, of course, was a special teams coach. Rivera is more of a defensive coach. It gives Bieniemy that freedom to become the offensive coordinator that he wants to be, to show more of what he can do as far as calling plays and running the entire offense. So now, is Baltimore better than Washington for that? Certainly the organization has been better, more stable. You'd be going to a coach who has more stability instead of coming here where you're going to have a situation where the team will change hands at some point this offseason as far as a new owner goes. And then, so where would that leave you? Do you have more time than just 1 year to prove yourself? And plus, you'd be working with Lamar Jackson up in Baltimore, but you have better pass game weapons as a receiver in Washington, and maybe you have a good run game here, you have a good run game there. So anyway, more to be learned there as well. As far as the sale of the team goes, consistently have heard for a while now that that people inside the building and others expect this to be a sale, expect it to be a full sale, or certainly a majority share, if nothing else. And, they continue to hear that they would expect it to be sooner rather than later. So by the end of March, we could see a new owner in Washington. I don't think that's breaking any news. It's pretty much what's been reported for a while by multiple places. That's where we're at. Anyways, enough from me. Let's get to my conversation with Ron Rivera, the head coach of the Washington Commanders. Ron, first of all, I'm going to get to some football questions in a minute. I want to start off with the Salute to Service award that you're receiving. What does that mean to you?
It means a tremendous amount to me. It really does. Mostly because, growing up in a military family, my father served 32 years in the United States Army. And when you grow up on an Army base and you're around it at a young age, you begin to realize and recognize how committed, what type of sacrifice people make. And some ultimately make the ultimate sacrifice. And so to me, I've grown up with that feeling that I'm very grateful to that. I do believe we owe a debt of gratitude to those men and women that have committed their lives to our country. And so it's been something that I really feel obligated to do. And I do it proudly because of my father's service and because how much my mother loved the military life.
Were you surprised?
Yes, I was. They tricked me. They told me that they wanted to ask me a couple of questions on women in football. So I thought we were doing this presentation, and they walked me into the auditorium, and they presented me this iPad. So we need you to look at this, and it was some of the men that I had worked with in the Salute to Service stuff from the USO, from the military, Wounded Warriors. And then my father came on to tell me I won the award. So that was very heartfelt. So I really did appreciate that.
I want to ask you about some football questions, obviously starting at quarterback and, Sam Howell, but they're also, I'll ask you about Sam in a second, but there are a couple of quarterbacks who are available that you guys pursued last year. Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, all those guys are going to be free. And I know there's some things that you can't say about guys, but it does not seem like you're going to be as aggressive this offseason pursuing those guys. Would you go after any of those guys?
Well, there's an opportunity to get the right veteran, yes, at the right price. Again, we still feel a commitment to shoring up a couple of the positions, and one of them is doing the things that we need to do with the defensive line. The second one being, obviously, is we got some holes that we feel we have to fill on both sides of the ball. But when you look at where we are with those positions, you feel pretty good about what we can do. Sam Howell showed us a little something that we're very intrigued by, and we don't feel the need to go out and spend that kind of capital, draft picks and players, along with money to get to where we think we need to be. I thought we showed that we are more than a serviceable team if we can get consistent play from that position. I don't know if we need very, very, very dynamic play as much as we need dynamic play.
What is it about Sam? Well, first of all, do you see him going into, you've been, the reports have been, you're telling people that
Yep.
he's the guy you're going to go. Is that accurate? Are you going to go into the,
Yes.
to off season with him as your number one?
Well, we're going in, he's going to start as the number one, but it's something he's going to have to continue to earn, keep, and continue to show us that he deserves to be that guy. I mean, we are going to look at some options as far as veteran quarterbacks are concerned. We're going to look at the draft as well. But, we don't intend to go out and overspend on capital, whether it be draft picks, players, and money.
Is there something you learned from, obviously last year going aggressive to get Carson?
Yeah.
Is there something you learned from that? Or is it more about what you saw from Sam, even in that one game? And then also, because you guys are obviously with him in meetings on the practice field. So is it more about what you learned from him or what you learned last offseason trying to be more aggressive?
It's what we learned from him. We did learn a little bit about being aggressive. But also the biggest thing we learned, in my opinion, is that sometimes it is about putting all those other pieces into place first and then getting to the guy. We know and we recognize we've got to shore up some of the other positions, and if Sam has a chance to be that guy, we've got to make sure, we protect him and have the playmakers. And we feel we've got the playmakers. We feel we've got guys in place, but we've got to add a few more.
What is it that Sam showed you that gives you that kind of confidence in him right now?
Well, for the most part, his decision making, his ability to get the ball out quickly, his ability to put the ball where it needed to be, and he learned very quickly from his mistakes. He made a mistake in the game. He tried to touch a ball over the top of a DB and realized I should have just thrown it to the corner. I would have thrown the receiver open because the DB was in bad position. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that was something, and he knew it. He came to the sideline, and before I even had a chance to ask him what happened, he said, I should know better. I should have put that into the course. So he understands. He knows. And to me, that's a very positive thing.
Is it, and he's a guy that you liked before the draft as well. Yep. Was there something else that you learned about him during the year that maybe enhanced your thoughts on him?
It was how hard he worked, even though he wasn't the guy. And when he was the third guy, he worked hard. When he was the second guy, he worked hard. When he got the opportunity, he worked hard. And he didn't work any harder. He worked hard, period, all the time.
And then, it's funny that, you're also big on talking to some of the veterans down the stretch with some of this. Did you get some input from them? Not so much like to form the decision, but maybe that said, oh, okay, these guys are thinking that too.
Yes. And that's what happened. When you listen to what Taylor Heineke said and Carson Wentz said, that whole quarterback room was positive. When you listen to what Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel said, and you listen to what Logan Thomas said, and you listen to the defensive backs talk about his ball is different, those are all the things that eventually, you say, okay, talent knows talent, guys know guys.
And then switching gears, you had a meeting with the Snyders recently. What to talk about the offseason? What is it you're understanding that what you can do in this offseason? Are you going to be, does the sale kind of make things a little bit confusing for you guys?
No, it doesn't. What I've been told is business as usual. Mr. and Mrs. Snyder have been very, very supportive. Things that we've talked about. Great, for instance, is this offensive coordinator search that I've been going through. We had a number of guys that I've talked to. Some of us told us, well, I want to focus only on being a head coach. Okay, great. Some guys turned us down because, well, I'm the next guy in line and I like our situation. Okay, great. I understand it. Oh, I'd be happy to interview. I've interviewed 6 people, okay, in person. Had an opportunity to listen and talk philosophy, listen to, what their plan of action would be going forward. Listen to them talk about our roster. So I've gone through all that. But I also, during that process, have told, the ownership that what I would like to do is slow this process down. And I do want to see if I can interview every type of candidate. And there's obviously somebody that I'm waiting for that is coaching in this game.
Right. Is he the only one that's left for you to interview, or because there are some other guys in this game that, would have been on people's radar?
Right. And for the most part, that's where I am.
Okay.
I want to make sure I get to the guys that I want to get to. And as soon as this game's over with, that's my intention. I haven't been able to talk to them because they're in this game. And so we will go from there.
Do you think this will be wrapped up by the end of next week then?
I expect it to be close to it. I've gonna sit down, go through it in my mind. I've got some great notes on all these guys, and I need to decide, do I need to listen a little bit more, or have I been satisfied by what I've been asking and the answers I've got?
What have you learned during this process about whether your offense, your roster, or what they might bring to the table?
First thing I learned is that they all understand our roster. They like the guys that we have. They agree with me on some of the holes that we've got to shore up. They like the fact that, we have a stout defense. And it's something that they all feel would be would really help is to be stout on defense. Listen to the different ideas, different philosophies, and just the understanding that it's about concepts, teaching concepts, coaching concepts. Everybody shares concepts. How committed they are to certain concepts. That's the other thing that that I listen for. And then, obviously talking about not just passing concepts, but the run game. Talk situational football. What's your philosophy on certain things? And I'm looking to get the answers that really match my thought process.
How much of it too is a part of, if Sam is the guy that you want to be that number one, that you don't want him having to learn too much in the second year, or do you say, hey, if the right guy's there, you're just going to have to learn it?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm not worried about his learning ability.
Okay.
I think learning the offense that we had really it put a lot on a young guy, and I thought he handled it very well from the beginning. And I assume that he's not going to struggle. And I think he's also the kind of guy that will be able to work with his teammates and help them develop and grow as well.
And then, as far as your priorities for in terms of positions, how would you categorize or rank maybe the priorities?
Well, I don't want to get into that because, again, let's talking strategy as far as going into the draft and looking at players. But we do have some things that we need to shore up. I will say that probably the one thing that we are looking at in terms of shoring up is making sure we have the right kind of depth for the offensive line. The biggest thing that we've seen has just been the injuries that we've had to deal with in the last 2 seasons. Just really tells you just how important it is to be have a lot of guys that have the ability to be position flex type guys that can play more than one position in case of injury.
2 more questions. Daron Payne, have you reached out to him yet, or to his side yet, about a new deal?
We haven't gotten into money specifically. Okay, but that is somebody that is a high priority for us.
And then also, you had to go out to California last week, and the Senior Bowl was going on. What is your thought process behind what you want to do out there? And I know you talked to Anthony Lynn out there, visited your father, played in the golf tournament. What was your thought process with that? Well,
first of all, is as soon as the season's over, I hadn't taken a break.
Right.
My dad was coming up on his 87th birthday. It was an opportunity to go out there, and if something were to happen with one way or the other, I was going to visit a candidate. So I went there knowing that. I think people miss the value of going to a all-star game because how many coaches miss them anyways? You know what I'm saying? It's not like there's 100% participation. There's video, okay? There's tape that you can watch. There's an opportunity to go to pro days that'll come up. You're going to see guys go to the combine, and you're going to get a chance to watch them there. You're going to get a chance to interview them there. So it's not like that's the only place I will ever see those guys, okay? And a lot of my judgment is going to be based off of tape, more so than anything else. And then some of it will go, some of the guys that I have interviewed individually. So as far as that's concerned, I'm not sure what the whole hubbub is. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, how many guys, can you sit there and say that we've drafted from the Senior Bowl? anyways. Okay. I mean, again, let's be realistic about what's at hand for us in terms of technology. You know what I'm saying, John?
Yeah.
I mean, it's honestly, I think it's just give somebody an opportunity to bitch about something. Okay. That's, to me, that's the way it feels. Okay. I'm not a big fan of going to the Senior Bowl, because if I'd gone to the Senior Bowl, every guy that wanted to be an offensive coordinator would have come up to me, and I wouldn't have been able to watch practice to begin with. I mean, no, I believe me, I know it because I've gone through it. When I've had to hire staff, that's what's happened. We went down my first year in here. Okay, we flew down for the day, and I didn't get to watch much practice because everybody came up to me. Everybody wanted to interview with me. Everybody wanted to talk to me. So let's be realistic about those things. You know, I mean, again, it's one of those things that I've gone through it. I understand it. I get it. And some people put a bigger value on it. Great. But, you know, in my 12 years as a head coach, the value I put on is what you see on tape. And then, you know, I go from there. I mean, I watch 3 or 4 games per player. Some guys I'll watch more. Like when we were watching quarterbacks last year, I watched 8, 9 tape for some of the quarterback prospects we looked at last year.
Ron, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I know you're doing the round, so I appreciate your time.
All right, John. Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Thanks to Ron Rivera for joining me, and thank you as always for listening. I said this last time. I'm going to put together a 3, 2, 1. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Ron Rivera, the head. Unbelievable. 3, 2, 1. That's it for this episode. Thanks to the coach of the Washington Commanders, Ron Rivera, for joining me, and thank you as always for listening. I brought this up on the last podcast. I'm going to say it again. Stay tuned over the next one of the next future podcasts. I'm going to announce a situation where if you want to do a private Zoom with me, you can. I've done this before where you collect three listeners, come on with a private podcast, talk about whatever for about 30 minutes. It's really as a thank you to you guys for listening. Stay tuned for future episodes, and I'll give you details how you can become one of those 3. Anyway, I'll be back on Sunday night, Monday morning with another podcast. I'll talk to you next time.